was great to have him agree to speak to our hort. The title of his talk is Hardscape Plants, an exploration of local plants that are ideally suited for life on rooftops, walls, balconies, planters, and patios. Jonas runs Ecoman, a landscaping and gardening practice that has shaping residential spaces. He sees the city through the lens of nature. Buildings are cliffs, streets are canyons, and roofs are islands. Jonas will discuss his ideas and show us how ecological references can help us choose the right plant for those tough urban spaces. When I talked to Jonas, his remarks about how basically most of Toronto gardens are an understory, that really resonated with me. And I felt that all of us have felt that, where we've looked at gardening books and we've had grand visions, but Jonas is right. We're an understory. You know, it can be very dry. The maple trees, I mean, who doesn't have a maple? I mean, nobody planted them, but we've all got them. And I mean, if we can learn to think of ourselves as an understory, and when you go for a walk in the woods, what's growing, you know, those are things that I think would help us. Anyway, love you, Jonas, and take it away. I'm going to unmute. Jonas has to be unmuted. Oh.
Okay,
Unmute,
I'm here.
Jonas. All right.
All right, thanks for having me, everybody. And I'm just going to share my screen. And I'm just going to okay, is that working?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to try to thread the needle tonight, because there's a bunch of people have heard me talk about this stuff already, and there's a whole bunch more that have never heard me talk about this stuff. So I'm going to try to thread that needle. And I thought the default for Parkdale Hort should be as nerdy and as many plant things as possible. So that's what I'm trying to I'm just going to try to do as many plants as possible. We're going to do 4 ecological references, and I wanted to start where Stefan Weber left off. So if you remember last month, he was talking about woodland understory, but he also talked about rocky woodland understories, and sort of started to get into an area where it's not just a woodland understory, but there's even more depth to it. So we're going to look at buildings or cliffs, and we're going to look at when a woodland understory reference kind of breaks down, you kind of get into this buildings or cliffs reference. And then that breaks down too, and you start getting to this post-glacial reference. So we're going to explore that a little bit. And then the final one is just what is the ecological reference for inside plants, for room temperature. So I've just started preliminary research, but I'm going to share with you my approach for that. So that's where we're going tonight. How much time do I have, Mary Lise?
An hour.
Okay. All right. So it's 7:30. Okay. All right. So for those of you who have never heard me rant about ecological references, I just use them to sell garden designs, and I use them to come up with plant lists for the gardens. Most of the work that I do has a climate approach to it, or a climate perspective. And so some of the ideas that I have, I'm not going to talk about climate tonight, but I just, so that you know, these ideas come from in the context of climate change. So one of the things that we have is loss of biodiversity. And so anything that we can do on our own properties or our clients' properties or in the cities in general to improve that. So these are just pictures of a few things I've seen in the garden over the last summer. Most of us are using, like if you're a gardener, you've heard of the woodland understory idea, and you probably have a whole bunch of plants that are specific to that reference. And if you're designing this, you might think of a woodland understory reference. But there's other ones that we have to think about. What happens is the woodland reference kind of breaks down a little bit, and anybody who's tried to have a mature woodland garden knows it takes a long time to establish, and some of those plants are tricky or take a while to get going. I'm thinking of sort of some of the more traditional woodland understory plants, whether it's bloodroot or trilliums, things like that, can be fairly delicate, and certainly you'd think twice about putting them in the front garden. So other woodland references is, and I think Stefan talked about this, is like if we start to dial into it, sort of rocky, thin, shallow soils. And this starts to get at something that cities have a lot of, which is concrete and stone and gravel and asphalt and bricks. So this starts to get to be a little bit more appropriate. So this is a garden on Dundurn. We built this wall, and you can see it sort of has that slope to it. There's a lot of stone around. So it kind of has that same dynamics. And that's what ecological references is just about, the idea that a site is going to have a similar dynamics to an ecosystem around us. And so we can use that idea to get a whole bunch of ideas for plants. Where the woodland understory reference starts to break down is when we ignore the hardscape. So a woodland understory reference will skip the fact that there's a big building or a house or a sidewalk or a street. And when you start to think about all of those things that are sort of surrounding the garden, then you start to have to change your reference a little bit. So let's talk a bit about, this is, I guess, my favorite ecological reference, which is the buildings are cliff idea. And I'm going to show you a whole bunch of plants that work with this one. But the basic idea of this is that the dynamics on a building or a terrace or a patio would be similar to the escarpment down the street from us. And the streets can be seen in that sense as canyons. And rooftops are kind of like islands, although they're not surrounded with water, but they're surrounded by air. So things have a hard time getting to them. We might not get the pollination that we need. We might have things colonizing the roof from the air. It might come from bird seed. And we see a lot of interesting dynamics on roofs where plants are coming on we have never seen before. Certainly were not planted. So we're thinking about the escarpment when we're planting terraces and balconies on condos. And one of the things that we noticed right away is these plants have incredible ability to grow in very narrow crevices and cracks. So the reference that we used, basically we started to do an academic literature review of all of the inventories of plants for these local ecosystems, whether they were cliffs or alvars is the other one that we use. And when we're planting a green roof, we have to think about how those plants are going to be pollinated. Will they be able to produce seed? Are those populations of individuals going to be viable going forward? And so some of that island stuff comes into play. And then, of course, this alvar idea, sort of like a horizontal cliff, if you will, where you just have these crevices and then you have plants growing. On the picture on the right, that's juncus growing in the lane behind my house. Little and you see all kinds of, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of plants that have sort of cosmopolitan, come on their own. And then I'm going to show you a bunch of plants that I think we should try to use more of. One thing about scale is that, you know, the plants that I'm using for walls and roofs are the same plants I'm using for planters on balconies and terraces. So I really don't think that scale is a huge deal. I think we can work at everything that I'm talking about tonight should be applicable in your pot on your balcony as they are on a green roof or on a green wall. So if you just have a little patio with a few pots around, these ideas actually started from there. So Barry Parker, one of our more beloved members, actually helped inspire this work. So I'm going to show you that a little bit in a moment. So I'm going to talk about some landscapes that are really missing the mark, but maybe this buildings or cliffs idea would be helpful. So on the left, this is what David Lehman would refer to as the hell strip. I think we can all agree. And then on the next one over, this is actually what people try for when they go for low maintenance, like putting out pebbles and planting cedars. And I have a whole section of this talk related to cedars, so we'll get to it. But this is actually really close to what I'm working on, believe it or not. But it just misses the mark, and I'll just show you a couple of examples. And then the two landscapes on the right are this one showing people who are just laying down fabric and putting down pebbles, and that is considered low maintenance. But of course, it gets colonized right away by all kinds of interesting species. So this is sort of the landscapes that I'm working on or thinking about. And this is typically what happens. And I'm going to show you a couple of ideas for other things we could do. So this was a project at Fiesta in the laneway where we engaged with the city, and they wanted to reduce stormwater going into the sewers. And we wanted to create a little bit of an opportunity for green and slow down water a bit. And this landscape has been colonized by opportunistic plants that are cosmopolitan, sort of naturalized to the city. We did plant some seeds in this and planted some plants in here, but mostly this is what I would call an urban alvar. And then this is a look at a palette of plants that we put in just recycled fabric pots. But the palette of buildings or cliffs, this all comes from the same palette of plants. So we're actually going to look at some of these plants, and starting with some ones that I would put the plants of this buildings or cliff into two buckets. There's the plants that I already knew that I had no idea could grow in a very difficult environment, in a very gravelly soil in full sun on the side of a cliff. So, and then there's plants I've never heard of or have never used. So Comptonia peregrina, or sweetgrass, that's the one on the right. It has a fabulous smell when you run your hands over it and sniff. And it's really not easily available in the trade. And I had never grown it up until 4 years ago. And I planted this in 4 parts gravel, 1 part soil, and left it in a parking lot for 4 seasons. And it never got watered, and it is amazing. And this is a great plant for bold foliage in difficult situations. This could be used in a terrace or a balcony or a planter, and it gives you a fern-like foliage, but it does it in full sun. So you can do this in a very difficult, hot situation. The one on the left is looks like a regular yew. This is the native yew, Taxus canadensis. Again, not very easy to get, but this one has been growing in 4 parts gravel, 1 part soil in this planter for an entire year. And I just looked at it this morning, and it's greening up and looking very happy. So I was very surprised. When you read the literature on Taxus canadensis, it says, woodland, rich woodland, understory, moist, well drained. like I didn't really think that this was going to work at all, but it did. So I have a few of those. I started buying them a few years ago. Whenever I found them, I would just buy them because they're hard to find. And then there's so many different goldenrods, and this is a picture of a prototype green wall we did, which is made out of 4 ingredients: gravel, soil, stone inside that gabion basket. So we have, and plants. So we have metal basket, stone liner, plants, and then gravel inside. And this is Solidago caesia or cesia, and it's spectacular yellow flower in late summer. And never ever once showed any stress from the heat. This is a much larger green wall we built last summer, and I don't even have the finished picture because we finished late in the summer and they were still constructing a deck and stuff. So I don't have a picture from this spring yet, but this had about 40 or 50 species of plants that are all local to that cliff and alvar ecosystem. This is my briefcase that I use for talks. I've got a couple cedars growing in there. We're going to talk about cedars in a bit, so I won't rant about that. But I had big plans to do talks and bring my briefcase. Now everything's online, so I'm just showing you a picture of my briefcase. My idea for hardscape plants is that while we stand around arguing about whether we should plant native plants in the garden, we're losing sight of the fact that the rest of the city is becoming a hardscape. We are adding outdoor rooms, we are adding additions, we are paving the planet. And so the best defense is a good offense. So my idea is to look for opportunities to infiltrate plants into the hardscape, to show that plants actually are critical infrastructure and not just beautiful, but actually provide services. So rather than having 3 pots on your stairs, I turned these stairs into one big pot, and now I water my stairs. And this, these plants, we're going to look at them up close in a minute, but you can see that there's a wide variety. I have herbaceous wildflowers, ferns, some woody plants, and some cedars, of course. So another plant we came across in the inventory, this is from Talus Slopes. This is from the base of the cliff of the escarpment, grows in gravel. This is Sambucus pubens, very similar to Canadensis. So you might know elderberry, but the one that they usually sell is Canadensis. This one flowers early, produces a red berry, and grows very fast. So it's one of those early succession plants that'll give you quick coverage and bold foliage. And this is growing in 4 parts gravel, 1 part soil in the towers. And you can see that it's perfectly happy. It's not, it's, you know, it's flowering. It's doing very well. Oh, there's the picture of the planters in the stairs. And that's kind of like what it could be. This was what it started off as. Another one that here's one that's sort of in that first bucket. This is serviceberry, Amelanchier canadensis. This is one of those plants that I knew very well. I use it all the time, but I had no idea that it could grow in that cliff environment. So we've been growing serviceberry in gravel, and it does very well. And it produces obviously edible fruit. Birds love it, so do kids. So we have planted a bunch of these on people's balconies, on condos in gravel, and it's doing very well. The one on the left is sumac, rustifina. That's obviously a really easy one. You see it on the side of a highway, grows in the ditch, fantastic plant, great fall color. This is one that I always thought of as a grassland plant or a meadow plant. because you always see it on lists whenever anybody's doing a wildflower garden, they put Coreopsis in for their wildflower mix. This is an easy plant to buy, but this is at DuPont and Ossington, and there was a fire here, and this building burned out maybe when I was a teenager, so 20, 30 years ago, and they never rebuilt it. And Coreopsis must have come in from the gardens above and has completely colonized all the crevices of this. So one of my favorite things to do is take pictures of wildflowers in Toronto. And this one grows just beautifully in literally a 1-inch crevice, and it flowers in the summertime, and it's just a great plant. And it can be used in this sort of gravel mix. This is sedum, and you know, the only thing that's kind of interesting about this one is I took this picture at the Lever building. This is an asphalt parking lot. So it looks like a picture that I'm showing you of like some native ecosystem somewhere, but it's actually just the Lever, you know, the Lever building is at the QE and the 404. So it's right downtown, and this is the middle of a parking lot, and there's sedum growing on asphalt and moss duff. There's one other bucket of plants, and that is plants that I knew very well, but that had, oh, I said that already. Yeah. So this is one of those ones, Agastache, that I know very well. It gets planted in wildflower gardens and meadow plantings, and but I had no idea it could do this. This is growing in an asphalt driveway in shade. I've also seen Agastache growing in full shade under Norway maple. So for those of you who are into like dry shade Norway maple understory, I've seen this flowering underneath the Norway maple. I don't know how, but it was. So this plant is very pliable. We'll do a lot of different things. I wanted to show you some interesting research that I've been doing. So this is from the third prototype. The first prototype I'll show you. The second one was that big wall with the goldenrod. And this one is interesting because I'm using recycled concrete crusher run for the soil. And the reason I'm doing that is, again, for this whole climate idea, is like, how can we reduce inputs? And I think that as gardeners and as horticulturalists, we've gone through long periods of making it where it was very popular to amend your soils and to try to, you know, change the garden to suit the plants that you really wanted. So you would amend the garden to have a rose garden, or you would amend the soil to do a very special, you know, rhododendrons, for example. You have to do a lot of maintenance on the soil side, or management on the soil side. So I wanted to see what plants could I grow from this buildings or cliff palette, literally in recycled concrete. So this planter has the same palette of plants, and this is Geranium robertianum, which I can show you pictures of it growing on the escarpment. It's sold as a native plant, although I've been told by people who are very smart, and much smarter than I, that it is apparently not native, but I love it. It's growing in a terrace on a balcony, and it's flowering and rambling around, and it's super fun. This is a picture of the towers. This tower was made out of hypertufa, and I mentioned Barry Parker, one of our most beloved members. He actually had some amazing troughs, and this tower idea came from his beautiful garden in Parkdale, and he had all these troughs, and he would always grow willows. This is actually his trough that it was too heavy, so I was the only person who could take it away when he moved to Montreal. So I dragged it over to my house, and the berberis on the top is the only thing that's left that I haven't killed of his. Everything else is crack mix stuff, stuff from the buildings or cliff stuff. And that fern is Polypodium vulgare, which you'll see Polypodium on lists of inventories in cliff of the escarpment. And Polypodium is available commercially. And this one has been growing in this pot for 3 years now. And it's pretty happy. It's basically evergreen. You'll get the foliage, last right through the winter, and then late in spring, you'll get a few new fronds coming up. I'm sure Stefan Weber would have mentioned Penstemon hirsutus. So I took a whole bunch of these and put them in the towers, and they did fabulously well. They actually get kind of woody at the base, so they actually give you a whole bunch of sort of 3D, like they grow out from the towers a lot. So you can get them to really give you more volume. It's like people's hair that has really puffy. This is like that. It really gives you a lot of volume and it really grows out into the landscape. I'm going to refer to this one again a little later on, but this is one that I had never heard of. And I went to Grow Wild. Paul Hayden grows a bunch of native plants. And I was looking for Ranunculus fascicularis, which is an Alvar buttercup. And he didn't have it, but he's growing it for me now. But he had Ranunculus rhomboideus, which is the exact same thing, but grows in a meadow. And so I planted it in the towers, and I'm going to show you a picture from this spring. It's actually came back quite nicely. I'm not sure if Stefan mentioned nodding onion. This is Allium cernuum growing in a planter down the street from my house. And I planted it there, and it's been growing there for 4 summers, and it never gets watered. Now there's a woman down the street who harvests it and like eats it, I think. So I do see it getting cut back every once in a while. But it has a fabulous summer flower and is one of the toughest plants of all the hardscape plants. Of all the ones that I've grown, this one can be literally just forgotten about and will just putter along and do fine. I thought I'd mention some ones that everybody's heard of, like prairie smoke, you can buy easily. This one will grow in straight gravel. So this could grow on a green roof. It could grow on a wall. It could grow in a little planter. And I think it's beautiful. It's easy to get and nice spring show. I thought I'd show you a few of the things that come onto the city on their own. And that we're going to get into some ideas. But this is populus. This is 3 different ways. On a green roof, the middle one is an upside down roof, which means it has a gravel top and an insulation underneath. And that is next to the Mountain Equipment Co-op green roof. So this is the next building over. And you can see it's being colonized by poplar. The one on the right is the Lever building, and that's on a tar roof. And the one on the left is poplar in the streets. That's just a regular curb. And poplar, you can see, is really excellent at creating little niches and finding places to grow. So I'm actually using poplar on my green wall prototypes, and it's been doing very well. Another one that I showed you as a great plant for balconies and terraces. Somebody had the idea to plant this as a street tree in a parking lot, but I thought, you know what? This is actually a really, really good place for this sumac. It might not become a full tree and it's short-lived, but at the end of the day, this is going to do very well. So the other thing I've been doing is coming up with new products, like new ideas for where we can infiltrate hardscape, how we can take these really tough plants from the cliffs and alvars and put them into our patio. So now we're actually growing little inserts that'll fit in between the bricks. This is Teco Block Aquastorm lattice paver that you could use for a driveway or for a walkway, and you can add the plants into it. So we did the same thing. We did our literature review, came up with our palette of plants. And then we're having these grown at the nursery now so that landscape architects can start to specify local plants into the hardscape, into the patios and into the walkways, as well as the vertical spaces. So this is specifically for horizontal spaces. And that picture there, you can see there's an oak growing in that one. That oak is growing in the recycled crusher run. That oak is a special Alvar oak called Quercus muhlenbergii, which is the chinkapin oak. So I'm going to show you some of these plants a little bit up close. I showed you the laneway, that one that we did with at Fiesta Farms. This is actually a cosmopolitan colonizer plant that naturalized in the city. It's an annual called Polygonum avicular, and it's the only green thing in the parks after the grass starts to go dormant. And you'll see like mats of it. It's like carpet, and it's really puffy and nice to walk on with bare feet. And it loves to grow in compacted soils. So it was one of the first plants that colonized this laneway. And I think it has sort of an interesting story, and it could be used to supplement the city's strategy for keeping things green in the summer, because the grass just does not do the job. I thought I'd show you another laneway plant. I don't use this one, but this just shows you how strong plants can be busting through the asphalt. That's Japanese knotweed, unstoppable and edible. I don't use it. Obviously, it's really difficult to get rid of, but I have to admire its tenacity, especially in the city. So remember I was showing you that buttercup? So this is a close-up of the Ranunculus rhomboideus, and this is this spring. So this is actually, you can see it's set its flower already, and this is growing in recycled crusher run with 4 parts recycled concrete, 1 part soil. And so I'm excited about this because it means that I'm going to be able to use this plant more often for this hardscape project. This is Penstemon hirsutus again. And I'll just show you that. See that grass on the right at the top? That's Carex eburnia. And this is one of those plants that I would think of as a wetland plant or a plant that grows in shade. But there's 300 species of Carex native to Ontario, and this Carex is full sun and grows in gravel. So it's really interesting how there's a Carex for every single job. And this one, Carex eburnia, has been one of the toughest of all the plants I've used in this sort of difficult situation. It's done the best. And this one I'm really excited about. I planted this Calamintha arkansana, wild savory, has a great fragrance and a beautiful flower, and it's growing in the recycled crusher run. And this is a picture of it coming back this spring. And hello, hold on. Yes, sweetheart. Just you bumped your knee. I'm gonna give it a kiss. All right. Okay. So this is Calamintha arkansana, and it's coming back. It only grows in limestone soil, so I thought I'd try it in this concrete crusher run. And this is a picture of it coming back in the spring. So this is spent 1 full summer and 1 full winter in the crusher run in the concrete, and it's coming back. So I'm super excited about this. I'm definitely going to use this plant again. This is a great one. Solidagocesia, this is just a picture I took of it in the escarpment. So I just wanted to show that, you know, it does actually grow really locally and you can use it in your plantings. Geranium robertianum, I showed you this one. This one's growing in the escarpment as well. This is a picture we took while we were walking. I also wanted to try to think of, since these are planters, or a lot of them are planters, I wanted to try to think about annuals and short-lived perennials that are sort of in that guild of plants that like sort of gravel, dry sun. And so Gora is one that is sold as an annual. And also the native one, Gora biennis, I'm also growing that, and I grew it last year, but it hasn't flowered yet because it's biennial, so it'll flower this year. But right away, I can tell you, Gora biennis is a massive plant, whereas this is a very dainty and beautiful plant. So this one you can buy from any of the, like Fiesta has it, any nursery will have it, but you can grow this one in gravel, and it just keeps flowering all summer. Fantastic plant. Verbena stricta, I knew about this plant, and I just thought of it as a grassland sort of meadow plant, and I've been growing it in gravel, and it seems to be doing very well. So again, a plant that I knew, but I had no idea that it could do this other thing. This is Arctostaphylos growing over the edge here. You can just see the leaf on top with the red stem. It's kind of out of focus, actually. It's grown very well for me. But I'm not sure if it's going to overwinter. So it's kind of evergreen, and it looks great all winter long. But then I've been waiting for it in spring to start to produce new leaves. And so far, last year, only a few of them survived. So I'm not sure if it was just the individuals or if it's something to do with the soil, or but they are super hardy, and they grow all across Ontario. This is probably the toughest one and the best one of all of them, Campanula rotundifolia. And if you grow it in the garden, you'll probably notice it's super floppy, and kind of, you can see how it turns 90 degrees and then turns 90 degrees again. And I realized it's actually really well suited for being on the side of a cliff and then hanging off the ledge, and then like precariously like leaning over something and then having a flower on the end. So it's actually perfect for vertical applications, and it flowers all summer. It also gets visited by wildlife.
Where is the key?
Sorry, my daughter's oh, this is it growing in the concrete crusher run. Sorry, sweetheart, I don't have it. This is the same flower, Campanula rotundifolia, growing in recycled concrete. So I was just overjoyed that this was going to work, because now I can really, we don't have to use virgin materials anymore. We don't have to mine materials and take away a landscape to produce a landscape, which is really exciting. If you think about what Jane Hutton talks about with reciprocal landscapes, she wrote a book called Reciprocal Landscapes. This is basically the idea that every landscape we build has another landscape that needs to be destroyed or altered to create the first one. So if we can use recycled materials like concrete, that would be sort of reducing our footprint as far as mining for our topsoils and mining for our gravels and for our stones. So that's why I'm interested in it. You know, Juncus tenuis is a super tough plant, and it just does a lot of work. It's not the showiest thing in the whole wide world, but it's green and it grows in difficult situations, and it creates a backdrop for other plants to show off. So this is penstemon just about to flower with Juncus tenuis as the background.
I don't know for sure, but
A little bit out of focus, pussy toes, Antenaria, super tough, and has this, looks like plantain, silver foliage.
Sammy, do you have the key?
I showed you the Rust typhina, great fall foliage, growing in the towers for 4 years. I think that one of the questions you're going to ask is, aren't these huge trees? And I think that the answer is definitely yes, but the gravel stunts the growth. So it's kind of like they're bonsai'd a little bit. They don't really grow as, with the exception of Sambucus pubens, which grew 6 feet in the gravel, no problem. So that one is a really big plant. There's the Juncus again growing in the laneway. There's Sambucus pubens. I just wanted to show you that the Sambucus pubens, after growing in the greenhouse over the winter, is already coming back. So I'm pretty excited about that. Here you go, Sammy. Take that. Quercus muhlenbergii, the chinkapin oak. It's been growing in the parking lot in full sun in this gravel mix for 4 seasons. Actually, the only reason I've had problems with it is when people come and snap the stem off of
Oh,
it. And I just thought I'd show you a few other ones that I just see around. I don't grow this one, but it's like, you know, butter and eggs, Linaria vulgaris, yellow toad flax, beautiful flower, grows in the crevices. And I think that when I grow the buildings or cliff stuff, I'm always looking for annuals to sort of bridge the gap and make it more appealing to traditional gardener eye. And this, I know that they sell snapdragons and stuff like that. So I'm kind of experimenting with what annuals would be interesting in these kind of potted situations with these other plants I'm showing you. And of course, I love to find columbines growing in laneways. That's so I have just a few pictures to show you of that. And one thing I wanted to show you about ferns is that I think that ferns is in that bucket of plants that I knew very well, but did all kinds of crazy things that I didn't know it could do. So this is Dryopteris growing in a 4-inch pipe with gravel that is attached to the downspout. So it does get moisture, but this is taken from this season. So it's green year round, growing in 4 parts gravel, 1 part soil, in 4 inches of soil. So really not a lot of soil. And so I thought that this plant is a woodland understory plant that needed sort of rich, moist environment. But of course, you know, it also has the ability to grow in very dry, poor, lean soils as well. So it's amazing how sometimes a plant just has so many different abilities. Here's another one, same situation, but about 6 inches over. This is Polysticum acrosticoides, Christmas fern. And it's already green from last year, so I'm hoping to get some new fronds in the spring. And I think if you just see at the top there on the right, that's actually a cedar seedling that came from across the way. And I'm going to talk about cedars in a moment, but cedars are awesome. They're the sort of the fundamental building block of the buildings or cliff reference. And I got a whole section on that for in a moment. This is Juniperus virginiana, the eastern red cedar, and it's listed as one of the top 10 best trees for birds. And it has grown for 4 years in this gravel situation. It's a fabulous plant. I think that we should be using this more. I think we could even potentially be using this as a street tree. Artemisia campestris, this one grows in beaches. I've seen it growing in Prince Edward County on the beach. I started using it in the cliffs and in the planters in the gravel, and it just because I love the silver foliage. It can handle blasting hot sun. It just likes a well-drained soil, and it seems to be doing just fine in the gravel, which is a little coarser than the sand it's used to. I don't think the flower is anything special, but the foliage is just fabulous. This is Senecio pauperculus, which grows in crevices and cracks in cottage country. And I want you to remember Senecio because I'm going to refer back to this when we get to the indoor reference. Oh, I'm running out of time. Okay, we're gonna have to speed up. Just remember that I just remember this plant because I'm going to come back to it in the indoor reference. And strawberries, you know, this is growing in that gutter in gravel. And people think of strawberries as a woodland plant, but it also will grow in gravel and crevices. I just want to mention a few that I found in my literature review, which I have not grown or cannot find. So if you have seed for it, or if you have plants of it, I'm interested in trying them in my gravel. So this is just an open call for those of you who are super into growing your own stuff. Cerastium arvens, Houstonia longifolia. I grew this one in the gravel. It did very well, but I can't find it. It's hard to buy. I don't know of a reliable source for it. And no one I know grows this one. Sabulina mishoxii. I have no idea where to get this, but I want to try it. This one grows on the escarpment. The picture on the left is from the escarpment, and it grows in the towers beautifully. Aquilata canadensis, great color. I think that you are familiar with it from Stefan's talk. Prairie smoke, I showed you already. Okay, so the main thing about the cedars that I wanted to say, and I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to go quickly, is to say, I think this is one of the most overlooked plants, even though it's ubiquitous. It grows for 1,000 years on the escarpment, and it grows beautifully in really restricted soils. This is a U on the left, and that's a juniper on the right. This is a cedar. This is a cedar. The one in the middle is a juniper, but the one on the left is a cedar growing in astroturf. And I'll just show you. This is a full-size cedar. You can see it has 0 root zone. There's nothing there for it to grow into, right? There's just nothing there. So what would make sense is to put this in the street as a street tree where it's growing right in the sidewalk. And I don't know what the reason is that they don't do it. The only reasons I've ever heard are that it's evergreen and they want to be able to see, you know, people see out their windows. It's all crappy reasons. They're not horticultural reasons not to use it. I think that we could not have to replace plants every 7 years as street trees. We could have plants as this as a street tree that would grow for potentially 1,000 years. So it lasts longer than the condos, probably lasts longer than the street. So these are the things that I think we were sort of overlooking. I think cedar would make a wonderful foundation plant for all of the situations that I'm telling you about. This is one that's 1,000 years old. There's another one on the escarpment, 1,000 years old. So what happens is that sometimes even the buildings or cliffs reference breaks down, and then we need to go to the post-glacial reference. And this is what happens when you're a young professional couple and you move into a gentrifying neighborhood, say Parkdale or the annex, and you do a big renovation and you inadvertently cause catastrophic disturbance onto your landscape. So you've done your addition and you have completely blown it up. We invited Sarah Finkelstein she's a professor at U of T, to talk about what plants colonized after the glaciers receded, as a reference to what happens when concrete and construction and this happens. Yeah.
Jonas,
Yeah.
is there a door you could shut? It's hard to hear you. It's hard to hear.
Okay. I'm just gonna leave. Sorry, everybody.
That's fine. Perfect.
Okay. So there may be people in the audience. Oh shit, sorry. There may be people in the audience who just bought a house in Toronto and they may have done a renovation. And this is typically what I would see when I get the call. You know, they've completely denuded the site. There may have been bins sitting on the space for a year. There may be huge trucks that have been driving on it, or machines. So there's a guy named Peter Del Tredici who wrote a book, and he talks about sort of suburbia as a post-glacial landscape, where built their subdivisions and then plastered it back on the topsoil back on, and then throw some plants in. So we're dealing with high compact and poor soils. And so what plants would like to grow here? This is sort of like when the building Shepherdea canadensis, difficult to find. I bought a bunch of them this spring, so they're on pre-order. I'm going to use these on a project on Major Street, which had exactly this situation happen. Okay, so I don't have a lot of time. I just wanted to show you that indoor reference. I promised Mary Lisa I would do this. Because of the pandemic, we were looking at ecological references for inside and what happens at room temperature. So I'm just going to walk you through this really quick. And I think we have a few minutes left, right, Mary?
Yeah, Jonas, just do whatever you want.
Yes. Okay. Just okay. So indoor reference, we have, no matter where we are in the world, or even if we were on Mars or a space station somewhere, we know that the inside is going to be roughly room temperature. It's going to be fairly dry, and there'll be a variable light regime. So the idea was to research places on the planet that are like this year round. And this could be, the application could be for indoor gardens. It could be for walls. It could be for shopping centers. So we identified the Mediterranean, which there's 5 of them. There's California, the Mediterranean, and Chile. And I just wanted to, since we're right at the very beginning of this research, I just wanted to show you that there are really amazing maps of plants. This is California. This is Southern California in a landscape called 85G. And so this is called the Daigen Western Granitic Foothills. Now, it is room temperature there year round. So we thought we'd just dive in and just see what was growing there. Plants that we haven't actually been able to find and grow. We're still at the very beginnings of this. This is what I just planted at my house to try to get this idea going. Most of the stuff that we found, and I have to say, I'm not an indoor plant person at all. But most of the stuff that one of the things we noticed right away is that nobody keeps track of the names of plants when it comes to indoor stuff at all. So we had a really hard time trying to figure out what any of this stuff was. And then where it's what its provenance was, like where does it come from? Where is it growing in its natural habitat? So I'll just show you. I wanted to draw a line between the buildings or cliffs palette. Ton of Arctostaphylos that grow in Southern California, and it's actually in our palette as kinnikinnick or beerberry. Arctostophilus uversi. So I thought this really looks interesting. I'm going to try it in the gravel. I'm definitely going to try the one that's native here, Arctostophilus uversi. If you can find any of these other ones for sale, I'm going to try these ones too. Yerba Santa. I don't know where to buy any of this stuff, just so that you know. It is available in the States. I just don't know where to buy it here. Here's another one that actually has Sambucus. This is one that shares the same genus as the one that grows at the talus slope, Sambucus pubens. So again, there's a lot of these plants that share the same genus that are growing in similar situations, just in a different climate. So I thought that was kind of cool. A lot of these plants are growing in California. And Ceonanthus. Ceonanthus is native, not this particular one, but Ceonanthus is native to Ontario. So again, I really want to try some of these ones that have that connection with that gravel sort of habitat. I'm going to keep skipping through. I kept finding amazing ferns that were growing in California that are also growing in Ontario. And so Palea does grow in Ontario, not this exact one. There's another one, Dryopteris, which I showed you. There's a Dryopteris californica, which grows in California, which I really want to try. If anybody knows where to find it, I'm happy to grow it in my house. Paintbrush and penstemons. So like, again, these are just ones that we just kept seeing the same genus over and over again. Rhodia. So these are all of the ones that we were looking at. And I have to say, we're just really at the very beginnings of this, but I think it would be really fun to think about if you had to do a large installation, say at the Eaton Center, and it was going to be like 100 meters long or 100 feet long. You could have this whole thing just hang together as one sort of population. This would be really fun to do. I can be reached on Twitter, ecoman.ca, Instagram, ecoman_Jonas, email jonas@ecoman.ca, my website, ecoman.ca. Some of these plants, particularly the buildings or cliff ones, those are going to be available for sale. And I'd love to be a part of your next plant sale to share some of these plants with you guys. Or if you just want to look at what's available, you can just go there's a little store on the website.
Well, that's wonderful. Where's that little? I want to thank you, but am I muted?
No, you're good.
You're there.
Jonas, that was fabulous. I loved it. I loved everything. I've got all my notes for the plants, and I see Susie's going to be in touch about her front. So thank you, Jonas. That was wonderful.
Right, and what I should say is that we really need to take a few questions. There's just one or two. Mary Louise, do you want to go through them?
I can't see any. I can't see the questions.
Okay, so in the chat, we have Sky asking everybody, how much shade do the Sambucus and Rus typhina tolerate? Jonas?
So the tower that I showed you with the Solidago in it, that has both the Rus typhina and the Sambucus, and it did very well. Its growth habit changes, like it starts to lean and look for light, but it does handle it very well. And the sumac that's growing in my front garden is growing in the shade of Austria virginiana. So that one also is in shade.
And thank you. One of the other questions is, where are the 1,000-year-old cedars in the escarpment?
Bruce Trail. If you Google old growth cedars, the only reason that those ones are they're the last ones because all the ones that were on the ground got cut down so that we could have agriculture and development and stuff. But nobody thought to cut the ones down on the cliffs because they're too hard to get to. So they're the last ones and the oldest ones in all of Ontario, and they're amazing. I think that they should be the foundation of all plantings on buildings. They'll last longer than the condos.
It's absolutely great. And I would just like to let everybody know that Jonas is one of the really creative people in the landscaping world. He's been thinking hard about these issues, and he's trying to bring this not just to gardeners, but to landscapers, so that the industry can grow into these new ecological worldviews. And so thank you again, Jonas, for the work that you're doing to help all of the planters, the professional planters and us amateurs, grow towards a more ecological use of nature. Anybody else want to unmute themselves and ask a question?
I just want to say, it's Heather here, that I have a red cedar growing in my backyard that my sister brought down from the cottage years and years ago, and it's probably, well, it's towering now. It has 3 main trunks. And I had, speaking of birds, I've had cedar waxwings in there, which I've never ever seen in the city, probably during the migration. And it's full of chickadees at various times of the year and other various, the usual local resident birds. But yeah, they do love it. They love those little blue berries mostly. I think that's what they come for.
I know that in certain areas, the eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana, is considered a pest tree because it self-seeds very generously. Is there a threat of that being a problem in Toronto? Just not as likely. I mean, in prairie environments and open grasslands, it's considered a nuisance tree, an invasive nuisance. But
it does grow out of the asphalt in my driveway. I have seedlings of it if anybody wants one. I have to go out and make sure they're still there this spring. But I've had it there for about 25 or more years, and it's not invasive. No, not in a city backyard.
I'll take some seedlings, 100%. That's actually one of those ones that the nursery, I couldn't find the quantities that I needed in the format that I wanted. So.
Okay, I think I might only have 2 or 3 right now. I know I pulled a few out of the asphalt last fall. Sorry, Jonas, if I'd known. But yeah, I'll look and I'll get in touch with you. I've got your, what's your email? Sorry again.
Jonas@ecoman.ca.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi. Yes, it's Abby Bushby here. I'm especially heartened to hear, Jonas, of how you describe the cedar as a good prospect for a curbside tree. We had, when we were doing the Roncesvalles Renewed collaborative work with the city and the BIA to, renew the street, we tried to get some evergreen trees, not many, but, at strategic points. And the rationale was against them was that the city uses salt, and salt on sidewalks is especially harmful for evergreen. Now, we know that they are acid-loving plants, but I do feel it's overdone, overstated. So I'm encouraged to see your photos and description of how hardy the cedars are. And I would take to heart if we are ever in a situation where we want to encourage trees. Here's a question for you. Vancouver, Edmonton are known for their beautiful all-season evergreens. Do you have any knowledge about negative effects of too much salt? Edmonton is probably too far north to be using salt, but I imagine Vancouver might be. Do you have any out-of-city knowledge about how curbside trees are with cedar?
I can tell you that what I would say is I went to school in Vancouver, and you know their evergreens are, you know, spectacular. They don't have a lot of salt, of course, because they don't have any snow. But I think that the salt thing is overstated, or it hasn't really been tested. Nobody I speak to has ever actually seen cedars die that way. Most of the time, I look at cedars, if somebody forgets to prune them, they become trees. And a lot of them are right next to the road. Some of the pictures I showed you are right next to the road. There's certainly not going to be that much salt spray like you would see damage from wave action, or like large machinery like spraying salty water onto the foliage, which is a concern, but it doesn't happen. So I don't think that that's a problem. The bigger concern would be if you had it as a street, had all the water going into the voids that had a lot of salt in it, how that would affect the tree. But this is not, in my opinion, is something that we should be trying out right now. And I think that most of the reasons that I hear about it are mostly to do aesthetics or even safety. You know, people are worried about, you know, hiding in the bushes or something.
Jonas, they do get very rangy. The branches go horizontal, they go straight out. So if you're planting them as street side trees or curb trees, they're just going to grow further and further and further out. They would have to be constantly pruned.
So one thing about that, I actually agree with you that the best examples of cedars that I see around Toronto are the ones for trees, are the ones that are limbed up to a certain height. And that's typical, actually, of all ornamental trees. They are all pruned to a certain height before they get planted. And that should be the same that would happen with the cedars, is that we would be planting them and they don't grow back on old growth. So once you clear those lower branches, you'll never have them coming back like that again. They don't sucker or do anything like that.
Right, that's true. They're also great for birds. I've got the whole back of my garden is
fabulous
just a
for
ring of
birds.
cedars.
Fabulous
I had
for
an old
birds.
creek
Like,
bed through there, and yeah, and it's full of birds. Even a red-winged blackbird nested in there one year in the middle of the city.
the best thing we could do for birds is have more conifers, no question about it. They love to just hang out in there. It's good cover. It's fantastic. You know, they just love it. And I think that we have a real blind spot because they're not traditional street trees. But ask next time you're talking to somebody who knows, ask them, why don't we use cedars as a street tree? And you'll get terrible answers, just horrible.
Any more questions?
I have a question. A lot of this feels very radical to me. It's very exciting, but I'm just wondering how open is the landscape architect community to your ideas? It seems to go, you know, architecture is often so controlled, and I know there are movements that aren't as controlled, but the profession itself seems to be very orderly. And I just wondered how receptive people are to these ideas in that community.
I mean, you're right. There's a whole bunch of conventional, sort of traditional approaches to landscape, where this is obviously different from that. Having said that, I didn't say that I'm working with a bunch of landscape architects in design climate action. So anybody who's interested in climate and landscape can check out that. But they're all landscape architects, and they're all interested in, perennial polycultures and incorporating native plants into the design and coming up with alternatives for lawns. And so there's a young sort of group that's really wants to engage with climate, engage with biodiversity. They want to engage with having more complex planting communities. And I think that we need to give them more tools. That's my goal with that infiltrate hardscape sort of product where you slip it into the paver. I think that if we had, for example, if we had a sod that was a perennial polyculture that was made up of native grasses and ground covers like strawberry, and you could roll it up in a roll, if that was available, landscape architects would specify it, but they don't because it doesn't exist. So I think that we have to give people more choices in the marketplace so that they can express their creativity. And I think that there are plenty of landscape architects who would snap up the opportunity to plant some of these plants in their landscape. They just need to be able to do it in a way that is going to be successful. Because if it fails, then of course they've got problems from the client, their reputation, everything starts to fall apart. When I do it, I'm self-employed. So if I screw up, it's all on me. I don't have a boss, right? So I can fool around a little bit more. But my clients too, they don't want stuff dying or stuff not working out. So it really is a level of trust to try these new ideas. And they're not really that new. It's like, if we know that they last on the cliff for this amount of time, why wouldn't they do just as well in this environment? So I think
Well, it's not
I
that
think
it's
that
not that
the-
it's new in that sense. It's just you're connecting the dots. That's what's new, I think.
yeah.
So it's great. Thanks.
I think the landscape architects are, we're working with a group right now on 6 commercial buildings that are literally, if there's ever was a buildings or cliffs job, that's it. It's like these little crevice plantings in front of a large building that gets, mowed and blowed to within an inch of its life by the maintenance staff, so it really is going to be interesting to see how open they really are to some of these things.
Thank you.
One of the things that I wanted to ask about, Jonas, is I kept waiting to see if anybody from the Rock Garden Society was going to pipe up because, in some sense, you're creating rock garden habitats that rock gardeners have known about for years.
And I
That's
said
true.
at the beginning that Barry was the inspiration for all this because his troughs, I don't know if anybody here hasn't seen them, but they were legendary. And I had a picture of one of his troughs in the presentation. I guess I must have skipped over it, but he used to grow willows, these tiny little willows in his troughs, and they're incredible. And he would search far and wide around the planet for these plants that would just grow small enough that they wouldn't take over the troughs. And the only difference that I did was just to say, are there local ecosystems that I can draw from for these plants? Because I wanted more crossover with the conservation community. I wanted more appeal to the native plant enthusiasts. And I wanted it to be something that it directly impacted biodiversity. So there was a reason for, why I focused more on native plants for this, but not because I don't think we should, or I think we should only be using native plants, but more that there's so many native plants that we don't use or that we aren't aware of their special abilities, that I think that they would make a great matrix or a palette or guild, if you will, that you can then use the other plants to sort of punch up and do an extra bit of show. So for me, I think that Barry deserves all the credit for opening up my mind to the idea of growing plants long-term in small volumes of really poor, lean soils.
Jonas, if you're looking for plants that you can't get anywhere else, the Rock Garden Society is a great source of seed. I don't know if you're into growing seed or if you know somebody that could grow it on, but they're prolific seed savers, and they have a monumental and fantastic seed exchange, but it's only available to members. So just throw that out there.
Thank you so much. I am aware, and I'm very much a beginner with the seeds starting. I'm going to rely on David Lehman for all my seed needs.
Good move. Two plants that you're, oh, sorry.
So any further questions? We have a general question to everyone from Jay. Just talking about urban trees. And he says the city just massacred some trees, removing a healthy Russian olive and removed branches on a hackberry and an old apple tree. Who does the city hire as arborists, etc.? Russian olive is not native, and it has shown some tendency to spread into habitats. And so I'm not feeling as, although Barry had a Russian olive in his backyard. It's a tree that I would want people to be careful with. Do you have any comment on the subject of pruning of our street trees, Jonas?
In general, the city does a lot of it, but there's plenty of private businesses that subcontract, just like garbage and anything else. But for the most part, if you're seeing a really weird pruning, it's usually to do with the hydro lines, which I think you mentioned. They'll do anything because the right of way of that power line supersedes the health of the tree or the shape of the tree. And so the worst I've seen is usually where the tree's been planted under the power lines and they just have to like saw the top of it right off. I've seen that a lot of many times.
Okay, well, we're coming close to the end of the time here, and I'd like to thank Jonas again. Wonderful talk, thank you. Ron.
Can I just plug that?
Sure.
Can I just plug that if nobody's mentioned it already, Landscape Ontario is giving away $1,500 or to a maximum of $1,500 and a total of $15,000 for urban greening projects in Toronto. So I don't have the link for it to put in the chat, unfortunately, but I think that I could probably share it with you later if you don't have it. Do you have it already?
We do, and we
Okay, great.
can make people aware of it.
Okay, fantastic.
So, Ron, any closing words?
Just once again, thanks for everybody for tuning in or joining us in the meeting tonight. Our next meeting is April the 26th, same time, 7:30 p.m. If you want to, for those who are not on, or well, those who are interested, just join us. If you want to become a member, once again, email us at membership@parkdaletorontohort.com. Visit our website, parkdaletorontohort.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. That's all. Good night and be safe.
Yeah, so we have.
Thank you very much.
We'll try to put it up on our website.
Great.
Yeah.
Bye-bye,
That was
everyone.
wonderful. Thank